I took the offshore job because the alternative was selling my truck, and I'd already sold most of the other things a person can sell without it showing on their face. 8 weeks on, 4 off. The day rate was better than anything I could hit on land, and the work itself was the kind of thing I was good at and nobody else seemed to want. Sitting in a windowless room, cleaning up survey data until the numbers behaved. I'm not a diver. I'm not even what people picture when they hear survey team. I process. The multi-beam sonar paints the seabed in millions of points. The sub-bottom profiler listens down through the mud. The positioning system tags everything with where and when, and all of it lands on my desk as a flood of data that's wrong in 100 small ways before anyone touches it. Tides, vessel motion, sound velocity in the water column, a gull that flew over the GPS antenna at the wrong second. We's have antenna. We odd not PS is antenna. I'm Asian toe, tied in chowns of supnitididididid. We odd not con by me do. We odd not ten. I may do. I'm Asian to lek. My job was to find the lies the instruments tell and quietly correct them so the client gets a clean picture of the bottom. A pipeline route, in this case. He settling selby, recommends. He said that how many that he and is not a townside, and a scraps of the Mason. Sella said, I inside dat. Sella 7 cell. He said that, but deep water. That's all I was told. And that was normal. You don't ask the client questions on a survey job. You give them a chart, and you go home. The vessel was the Kestrel Reach, an old DP survey ship that had been re-engined twice and smelled like every meal anyone had ever cooked in it. I joined her mid-contract, choppered out from a coastal base I'd never been to before and would never see again. And by the time I'd found my cabin and my way to the data room, I'd already lost track of which direction was land. The data room, they called it the online room, even though half of what we did was offline, was a converted container welded to the back deck. 2 long benches of monitors, a wall of black equipment racks that hummed at a pitch you stopped hearing after the first hour and started feeling in your teeth after the first week. I didn't it as of monitors homing the aux semdens, open to die d desempty semdent, and a facet of hab in a moije, and so can pre-subinated. That 20 semdan with almond churning from medics and the medics, his cane some dissembly needed. Watch semita decem times of wish to. No windows. A single door with a rubber seal that thumped when it shut. The fluorescence up top had a flicker in one tube that nobody ever fixed the whole time I was aboard. A fast stutter just at the edge of where you'd notice it, so the room was always very slightly trembling. The man I was replacing on nights was named Pruitt, and he stayed an extra 2 days to hand over. One bod, one might, frappet semini, verstat, one minded, made it, one minded it in the 19I, one bod, one minded it, this bod, one my dad, one mated, one mated, one made it, one semini surdy. He was older than the job, the way some offshore people get, not in years exactly, but in the way he'd folded himself down into the routine until there wasn't much sticking out anymore. He showed me the workflow with the patience of someone who had explained it many times and expected to explain it many more. Bring the raw lines in here. Apply the sound velocity here. Run the cleaning filter. Eyeball the swath. Reject the spikes. Reconcile the navigation. Pass it forward. You'll get a feel for the bottom, he said. Out here it's flat as a parking lot for kilometers. Then it just falls off. You'll learn where the edges are. It was the most ordinary thing in the world for the first 9 or 10 days. The data was clean, which is to say it was dirty in all the boring ways I knew how to fix. Semon sellage, an ideal to liking to fix. Com and selatin to ves, I dated a wise about tint. I dend. As count, he capo when chilla 7 to pass, wise a gesture into the den fauta. I din 7 to the Waza with shit to liking mid. I dins I worked nights, midnight to noon, because that's when the survey lines were run on this rotation, and I liked it. The ship is quieter on nights. You can hear the generators settle. When he cas even you into 19 half. I 20 set of lie-sided selling meter heaven meter fate. Into Machak selling 2 the meter into 19D. I 20 this, selling my seta. I 2 wadded. You can hear the multi-beam, if you know how to listen, not the sound itself, which goes down into the water far below human hearing. But the soft tick the topside unit makes each time it fires, a ping rate so steady it becomes a kind of clock. From south of the down, so selving to bods and not the new fritteding dis, but I sell it out the me. Avenja, 1 meter of truckers, on try dad, I selman selled shockin' dis. Tick, 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 every couple of seconds, all night, the ship reaching down into 2.5 kilometers of black water and feeling for the floor. The first thing that was wrong, I almost didn't log, because it looked like exactly the kind of error I was there to delete. It was a single beam in a single swath, about 4 nights in. It sittered to 17 sir the park of a set-I truck, and the Finken medic and Nef rofing in the Devestend of a 74 job, and the Offentina Neffendies and Serves walk, and Dezappen to a dead Dotatai, and a Dezappen Medigad, and a Dezappen to Defrenchens hit 17 that a sitter Decipentine, and Dezappen to the 4 Jod the Steiny the Medicane that is. The multi-beam fires out a fan of sound, hundreds of beams across, and each one measures how long the echo takes to come back. Deeper bottom, longer travel time, simple as that. Sit at, under the 19 swi, set at a nef face can masoned, it is not added a d, ondrated the set it added a d. Well, ondrated a d, I did at, well natted, well nat, set it a d at, amen, well natted a d, ondrated a d, idea. This one beam, dead center, came back late. Not a spike you eject and forget. This was a clean, smooth, beautiful return that just happened to say the seabed under us was 40 meters deeper at that one point than every beam on either side of it. A neat little well in an otherwise flat plain, 1 beam wide, gone by the next ping. I flagged it for review and kept cleaning. I diffa selling fring. My not, mot. I endins, I selling park. I selling 420. I selling, my truck is selling frang. I selling metid selling motted chocket side John. I defa selling metid. I selling metid selling fordered selling frank. I selling frank. The next swath had it too. Same place on the bottom, relative to where we'd been, which is impossible, because we were moving. The ship had traveled 200 meters between those pings. A feature on the seabed doesn't follow you. I sat with that for a while. Then I did what you do, which is assume the equipment is lying, and I went looking for the lie. I checked the motion sensor. I checked the sound velocity profile. I checked whether the timestamp on those beams matched the timestamp on the navigation, because if the clocks drift, you can smear the data and make a flat bottom look like it has a dimple chasing the ship. The timestamps didn't match, but not the way drift looks. Its ID inmate shy, with shy D, with makas, with make. I jaunted to constress as a 19 cell until you, with shy D commended back a fermented a 19 cell and self. Drift is steady, a few milliseconds, growing slowly across the night. This was a clean offset on exactly those late returns, and only those. Traxact, and sell without it if first or did. It a do doubt, when not to jown. When not to jown. I had Verdun's out time. Needed steady hours, what's out tonk of either strack. Had first out to John, while the scented steady down. I treks em to Jown's elf to Trung. while descended to down, and tell. The late beams were stamped 14 minutes ahead of the ping that fired them. So 11 united. So 11 to the fired them. One humming telf. 17 minute. So 11 to into medics and. Oppo and telv. Not tick side. Solo we, when I telv. So 11 telv. Selen to the fired. So 11 to the knee. So 11 to the job, when semini the dissemini. When I tells in the you can't receive an echo before you've sent the sound. That's not a deep sea law. That's just a law. I wrote it up carefully, the way you do when you think you found a real instrument fault that the engineers will need to chase. I will you sending, and I den the mustad. I sending, I base assemble musum 7 tybe. I wrote it up carefully, as a lot of 7 times of comedy hour. I made it a .7 tibel. I was a Donnie in the 7 tibel. I was a Donnie in 80 to found a Donnings, but I 7 times was beam anomaly, persistent, fixed seabed location relative to vessel despite vessel transit, timestamp offset plus 14 minutes unaffected returns. I attached the swaths. I marked it for Pruitt, who was finishing his handover and would see it before he flew off. He read it in the morning, standing behind my chair with his coffee, and I watched his face do something small and tired. He didn't look surprised. That's the part I kept coming back to later. He looked like a man being shown a leak he'd reported a dozen times. Yeah, he said. Flag that one 9. 9. Category 9. It's in the QC manual. Non-conforming return. I steen to DAC, Sepion to the form, with Ricey and Chows of Log C. Mad trackings, with Ricey. Manual non-conforming return. Machow, with Ricey. Manual non-conforming return. He reached past me and clicked into the rejection menu, and there it was. A reason code I'd never used. Sitting in the drop-down between acoustic noise and bubble sweep like it belonged there. Cat 9 non-conforming. He selected it, applied it to the affected pings, and the late returns vanished from the clean dataset. The bottom went flat again. Clean parking lot. That's it. I said, we just delete it. We flag it. Deletion's automatic. He straightened up. Don't reprocess it. Don't pull it back. You flag it 9. It goes to the archive, and the chart stays clean. Client wants the floor. We give them the floor. I asked him what the late returns actually were, and said he had die on most POC, and refa, odd stick me, and refi da, I datter. I said he wears restanda. On refive what an I, and daughter. I daughter. What? I asked it the way you ask a thing you don't really expect an answer to, and he gave me the answer right here, in slightly different shapes, from everyone on that ship for the next 7 weeks. Above my pay grade, he said. I just cleaned the data. He flew off that afternoon. The helicopter beat the air over the deck and lifted him into a gray sky, and I went to my cabin and slept badly. And when I came back on shift at midnight, the multi-beam was ticking and the bad beam was there again, in the very first line of the night, in the same place relative to the ship, 14 minutes ahead of itself, waiting. When you jown the 9 exament, to came in the 9 beam out, was as zors of died, mesadzelities, and the meng, I flagged at 9. The bottom went flat. I told myself a story about equipment, and the story held for a while because I needed it to. When Frandis foul many did it to Dax, and the lackatimid cell without his off-ass, sows of longed in the stoma, I den off, ascended long, without it long denied ye 9 to set a am to self of, without den nigh na, I den me 90 and ID, without it lockix, shops shidi and 90. The QC manual lived on a shared drive, a scanned PDF of a printed binder. The kind of document that gets copied forward through a company for decades until nobody who wrote it still works there. Well, cessity, as veld and noun the city face, copied forward srited, for being ged done ba. And a document to ken magus, and to tell magen mighty for, when the SETI said, most of it was exactly what you'd expect: calibration procedures, acceptance criteria, the boring scripture of survey work. What out time as medi jan, mesidingo comede, what out ow, SETI ow, what out time sedicence, mat out time, what out time SETI ow, mesid auto, what out times an auto for medic, what out time. I went looking for the Category 9 Section 1 slow night when the lines were short and I'd caught up on processing. I dot who hungers had modded the nastivai. I went a dicked to county that had dotted the dotted. Line goddeds, may dicked odd. Without days in the steva do I won slow night canadi 17. Short condicata. I won 7 adi the ace. It was 3 pages, and it was older than the rest of the manual. You could tell from the font and from the way it referenced equipment I'd never heard of, recorders and analog gear that had been obsolete before I was hired. Added that they ought to ver, we jested they ought to me and mess of a mess quit. Also messed the ought to vers in the 99 shed. We ought to din. We for 2 hires in the sea ought from the mead. Wowed that me jaskow nappa. We for messadi ought to d, with shadow. It described Category 9 as a class of returns, not consistent with bathymetric reality, and laid out the handling. When salva, saman, my did, shogoi selfid, soto evatines, when itenia, not consistent with bathymetric reality, and laid out the handling. My did sell meant, my did sounds, and led zanesativing, flag, archive, do not reprocess. So far, so normal. But there was a 4th step, and it was the one that didn't read like a data procedure at all. In the event of Cat 9 returns ascending the water column across consecutive sweeps, it said, cease active acoustic transmission. Hold position. Maintain silence until returns are no longer received. Do not recover. I read it 3 times. Ascending the water column. The bad beam I'd been flagging was deep at the bottom, 40 meters below the floor, a hole that followed us. The procedure was describing a version of it that didn't stay down there. One that came up. Do not recover. There was a note at the bottom of the last page, handwritten and then scanned, the ink gone gray. It said, we stopped pulling samples after the 3rd cruise. Maybe we said it was compensive. It is a settable F. We stated dot on said it was version. We stopped pulling samples after the 3rd cruise. We stopped pulling samples after the 3rd cruise. Maybe was after do was compens for mordit. I took the job because whoever you are reading this, leave them where they are. When Baramant, for County West, and Mide, set aside dia, with our forshow monta, with our set aside the hour. When duo dia mide, when duo dia, when do ndio, one diide, when dio, one diide, one diao, one dio, one dia, one diard, one dio, one do, one dia. I didn't know what samples meant yet. Shapit as an aches, trekking a cha. It setted, shapit as I jaun, had divinet beselid. It's I jaun, had shapit as on. What setted a setted money. I didn't know what samples meant yet. I didn't know what samples meant. The survey I was on was multi-beam and sub-bottom only. This is SAG. That is many setter. When with Bicanti. Wefcon 7 times I dod. Wefcon telman cell contellence. Was Fifcon 7 cell con. Wefcon 7 17. with con 7 tementel and 7 telmans, if con 7 7 telens, with con telmentil, with con 7 7 7 telmand. We weren't recovering anything. We were just looking. I told myself that was the difference. I told myself the note was history. Some old crew's superstition baked into a document the way old documents secrete strange marginalia. I flagged my nines and I signed my logs and I went to dinner and listened to the day shift complain about the food. And sell without it howaz, and selvin howie, and selvin howaz ha, and selvin howaz haz, selvin odd. And I did it Southerdin, and I signed my logs and I went to dinner, and selvin you did a fracking the logs and tonated a knot. And I denny did it, and I logs and I wit without a howaz. And I went to dinner and listened to the day shift complain about, but I started watching the timestamps after that. And once you start watching timestamps on a survey ship, you start to see how much of the record is held together with tape. There was a line in the navigation log for the previous week, before I joined, that the vessel had run at the eastern edge of the block. It's still on time, Dove. That SETI and emis for mentau sendits. I SETI and rum that Palashan without tella Joe. And thou SETI at SETI and downed. With it SETI and the mendit. One hajandits. And the sped dit SETI and don. I SETI and dak. Endaus. I SETI, a real survey line, properly logged, with start and end times and a clean track. The cessation of lies under Shul Lie 4. I 70 that. So in trocking this element, so into most fermitich, so into most of lice element, I selment times as Asian. Offshore and shell meta chow nil. One assessment. Why salsa durge. Why assa dead. What? Except when I pulled the GPS positions for that hour, the ship hadn't been there. Inside ham was for stent of inside, and as our setting Mac YD, it's denture remnant with way to a zamide. I for sighting a demtai by. It's sighting a dem at shorge, unto lockout at the lug. It's sighting Mac YD setting matey then to lockout into demine. Unto wreck out to dem into the track showed us holding station 12 kilometers west. Engines idling on DP for the entire window. The line existed in the survey log. The vessel that supposedly ran it was somewhere else, doing nothing, for an hour, in the dark. There was a gap in the sub-bottom records, 4 hours one night, that the system log explained as acquisition paused for SVP, while on the 17s was squied in the 17, while I decipe said, while on des squy, while on the 17s of Jekik, while on night, while on 19, while on 1917, while on 1917, while on chide canoe medic. A sound velocity dip is a routine thing. You lower a probe, you take a profile, 20 minutes maybe, not 4 hours. And the SVP file from that night was there in the folder, time-stamped. But when I opened it, the profile was identical point for point, to the decimal to one taken 6 weeks earlier. The exact same numbers. The ocean does not give you the same numbers twice. The temperature of the water at 300 meters is never the same on 2 different nights, not to that precision, not ever. Someone, or something, had filed a copy and called it a measurement, and the system had accepted it, and the survey had gone on. I started asking around, carefully, because you learn fast that on a ship the wrong question marks you as a problem, and a problem gets flown home, and I needed the money. It's Ausen time. Trock, and at times in 19 Macy is Zemet, to dash and I seed Macanata ways and das. My county is Akandak. Chided my dickon, Wanja, I side dak. I Macy dak and muckandak. Wonjak and Jakandak. I asked the party chief, a square, sensible woman named Royce, who ran the survey side and treated the data like an accounting problem, which I respected. In the city Thanby accounting times has Showa's house. Cyver having de setters consent sounds adout thent, and for Cyvial. Top to me his visual, I ways it of our way child celicy of our towns a dot some towns a tillis out to waitcha. If ounce IV of, I framed it as quality control. In the city self, in the city service wouldn't I shoni fring cell. In the city self in the first amama. P can do that I vied. And the city cell. I framed it as quality control. In the city cell. I said I was seeing navigation entries that didn't match the positioning, and I wanted to know who I should report reconciliation errors to. And die, I did it not aneshens found, with recon modtine of lishan, with reconcel with recon medj from editao, with reconcel without it, with reconciliations of nada to, with recurni of Lawson Popitis or nada to no summitade, I speedy I, with recurni of, she looked at me for a second. Too long. You're the one who reconciles them, she said. That's the job. The log says we ran the line. The chart needs a line there. You make the data support the line. She wasn't being cruel. She honestly meant it as a description of the work. Don't overthink the bookkeeping. The client gets a deliverable. The block gets surveyed. Everybody goes home. I has had. Tinking at her shilleted no attraction to litter Joe. Dizit nis my zat. When would so for the maidly, when no attracts out. I would Joe and Askheim come into the fry did, when you're selled it, even if the ship wasn't where the log says it was. The log says where the ship was, she said, and there was a flatness in it, a door closing. That's what a log is for. I went back to the data room. I know. Shuda. Aname. City cell. I went back to the data room. The flicker tube stuttered overhead. The racks hummed. And I sat there understanding, for the first time, that the strangeness in the data wasn't a fault I was supposed to find and fix. It was a feature the whole system was built to absorb. There was a reason code for it. There was a procedure. There was a party chief who knew not to look at it directly, and a manual with a dead man's handwriting telling me to leave the samples alone. The institution wasn't unaware of the impossible thing in the water below us. The institution had been folded around it a long time ago, the way scar tissue folds around something it can't expel. That was the night I stopped sleeping right. It's hard to describe what that does to you. The slow version. I didn't crack. Nobody screamed. I just got thinner inside. I'd lie in my bunk after noon with the cabin shuddering from the generators 2 decks down. That low generator vibration that gets into your chest. And I'd hear the multi-beam still ticking up in the data room even though I knew I couldn't. The room was sealed. The sound didn't carry and I'd hear it anyway. I'm at a dot bun. I'll times in the Salvini fra. I dotted the strock tug, and I'd have rust, time coming in the strock to bodge, sachin panid. Tick, tick. The ship reaching down. I'd count the gaps and lose count and start again. I met the man who had actually seen it about 2 weeks before the end of the contract. His name was Tomas, and he was ROV, remotely operated vehicle, the underwater robots with the cameras and the manipulator arms. We weren't running ROV on the survey, but Tomas was aboard anyway, part of the standby crew, because the client had wanted recovery capability on hand and then never used it. He spent his days maintaining a vehicle that never went in the water, and his nights playing cards in the mess with whoever was awake. And one of those nights, it was me. He'd been on the earlier cruises, and the ones the manual's handwriting was talking about. First hand, and my dad, in Nuverdiv Nai, first hand dad, their cell made I, was mated to no, firstel mated to no mated stalking, and id cell mated to nighting, has neverdiv no mated sintend, firstand of no mated, firstanded sintenaubit, firstand can met the sample cruises. I didn't get